Hello, I'm Arthur Malman, your host for GGG Insights, and welcome again to our summer series on the future of East Hampton, its challenges, its problems, its opportunities. During this series, as some of you know, we've had a wide variety of local residents join us for their views. These include government people, community activists, we have students, we have clergy, and today we have Lauren Bolger, who is the chairperson of the Springs Citizens Advisory Committee. And for those of you who are not familiar with local history, we'll go back a little bit and decide whether it's called the Springs or Springs, because there is in everything a lawsuit about that in the last couple of years. But Lauren, why don't you tell us first about your background, how you got involved in all this stuff?
Well, I certainly didn't set out to get as involved as I am in everything Springs. I came out here as a young mother, as a renter. And one of the things I loved about being in Springs in my house was that the phone never rang, and I went out and I never saw anybody. And
well, the telephone's never ringing
anyway,
because there's no cell phone tower.
Right.
So you were ahead of the times.
There you go, see? And gradually, as my kids moved out of the house and formed their own households, I realized that I was spending much more time in my little cottage than I was in my apartment. And I subsequently sold my apartment and moved into the cottage and realized it was too small as a permanent house, built a house, and started looking around, nosing around for things to do. And then the next thing you know, I'm very involved in the Springs community.
Did you build your own house?
I did.
Oh, okay. So we'll get back to that because that's called the town code and your adventures with it. I'm sure there were some.
That could take a whole show.
That could take the whole show, right. But then you got involved with the Springs community?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to see what was going on with the Springs Improvement Society, of which I am still a board member. I was former secretary, and now I'm a board member, and I'm the person, should anyone want to rent Ashwa Hall, I am the person to get in touch with.
Oh, okay. I never knew who I would call Mr. Ashwag up.
Yeah,
but,
and you get me.
I get you, Mrs. Ashwag. Oh,
Mrs.
you must be the wife of
Yes,
Mr. Ashwag.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that started it out. And at that point, there was a lot of animosity. I have no idea why, but there was a lot of animosity between the Springs Improvement Society and the Springs Citizens Advisory Committee. What it was based on, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But I thought, I'm going to go over to the Springs Citizens Advisory Committee meetings and see what they're doing that is so offensive to the Springs.
Did you wear special armor or something like that? No?
I just kind of wandered in.
You wandered in, okay.
At that point, everyone was sitting around a table, and I sat down and just to listen, and within a few months, I found that I was a member of the Springs Citizen Advisory Committee. Well, okay, and then time went on, and then I found that I was co-chair, and then the then chair, Enrica Connor, decided that she had done it. I think she did it like 12 years, and she'd done it enough. And at a cocktail party, she said, I've had it. You're the chair. Okay. I said, the one thing I didn't want to be was the chair. But it has all worked out, and I really like the involvement that in the entire town as well as Springs.
Were you involved in Duck Creek Farm, for example? I just happened to be there this week. I mean, it's a terrific place.
It is a very, very exciting venue. It's owned by the town, bought with CPF funds, and the Arts Center at Duck Creek, which is a group of 5 of us, have been doing programming there throughout the summer.
Yeah, I was there for a classical music concert.
Yes.
Everything was perfect. The scenery was perfect. The weather was perfect, and the music was great.
Yes.
It was just terrific, a terrific opportunity.
Well, we've had several of those, and we're going to have a jazz concert the weekend after Labor Day on Saturday by the guys who play at Bayburger on Thursday night. They're coming. And there will be also a reception for the sculptors. There's an outdoor sculpture show that will be up there at least until October.
Well, you really talk about the history of the Springs here. I mean, artist areas, local. It was interesting, Lauren, because one of the things the GGG does is we sponsor from time to time, depending on how many people we're running and so forth, debates among candidates for the school board. And I've got to tell you, of all the school board debates we've ever had, I think, the highest quality debate attended by the most attentive people have been up in the Springs. I mean, it was just day and night from anyone we've ever done before.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Okay.
And the
Well,
reason
tell us what makes it work.
The reason is that the Springs school accounts for about 70% of our taxes. And so when those taxes go up, everybody really feels it. And as you know, Springs is a community that is filled with a lot of retired people, a lot of people who are just starting out with young families, and any kind of rise in our taxes really hurts. You know, people budget it out monthly, so even $100, $150 more per year is something that they take a look at.
Well, now you're talking about I mean, I don't know if this is opportunity as much as it's certainly a challenge. That fits our game plan here.
Right, right.
You know.
So this is something that is on everybody's mind in Springs.
How many kids do you have, for example, today, roughly, versus say 10 years ago? Do you have? Does it grow?
Oh, I
a
don't
lot?
remember 10 years ago. We're over 700 kids in that school, and there is an expansion that has been approved by the voters.
Right, it's going on right now.
But of course, that's not going to be built and ready for use until well into the 2020s. I don't know exact date, but maybe 2022, depending on how many setbacks there are.
You have a bunch of trailers and things out there now?
Yes.
Is that, yeah, that's what I thought.
Everybody gets used to them. You
Yeah,
know, everybody
sure.
says, "Oh, this is horrible. We can't live like this." But you know, it doesn't take long before people get used to it.
Yeah, what I found when when I went to school and when my kids went to school, the physical surroundings are important, but the teachers are so much more important.
Yes.
The physical surroundings fade if you have a great teacher.
Yes.
Teachers.
I think the teachers at the Springs School are really dedicated to the school, to the kids. There's a great art program there. There's a lot of extracurricular activities.
Does the art program draw in any of the local community outside the school?
Yes,
Oh,
they
Because
have.
you got a ready-made group of experts.
Absolutely. They have a visiting artist program there, and different artists are invited to come and for a couple of weeks teach the class and take them around. There is an art show every year over at Ashwa Hall from the Springs School. They go out on various expeditions looking, you know, they came to see the sculptures when there was a sculpture show up last year, and did a little write-up about what they saw.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of remember a couple of years ago, you probably were involved with it, was a whole bunch of the kids got together with somebody older and built the Pussy Pond Bridge or something. I mean, I think that was fabulous. I mean,
Yes.
that doesn't happen every day, obviously.
No, that was such a great community effort. Zachary Cohn was a big part of putting that together, as was Ray Harchin, who just, when there was no money and there was no way to do it, they didn't give up. And eventually there was black locust was donated and milled, and we have now the bridge that we have. Now the next problem is getting rid of the Phragmites that are threatening to
Overcome everything.
Overshadow the bridge. But that's a whole different issue.
Well, if you ask the people on Georgia Pond, that is the community expert group on getting rid of Phragmites. I think it's been at least 25 years that they've been working on it, and there's been some movement. They have another impediment. It's called the Trustees of East Hampton. So, but they're actually making some progress now. So you may call somebody who lives on Georgia Pond, and if their telephone works, because of course nobody has good telephone.
Well, landlines. That's why we still need landlines.
Well,
you
that's
know,
what-
as
that-
backup instead of the other way around. It's not your
exactly.
landline is your backup. Yeah.
Okay, but now what are some of the, I mean, obviously the opportunity that's unique for the Springs is drawing on the people of the Springs who have a pretty diverse background, a lot of artistic heritage and stuff like that. But you mentioned a large number of kids in a school that has to expand, which means taxes. How do you deal with that?
Well, every year we have to pass the budget, and nobody wants to deny the kids. You just don't. But there's a point, and they have the 2% cap, but every time you raise the taxes, that 2% is on a higher and higher base.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's one of the big issues for the future of Springs and even East Hampton, and it has been suggested that maybe there could be a commercial tax district for all of East Hampton that would be divvied up to each school on a per capita basis, depending on the hamlet.
But you know, the problem with that is people, when you mention that, people say, hey, look, I live next to a commercial district. I have the traffic on my block. I have the inconvenience. I have the smells, whatever, it's a pizza oven, whatever. And these folks live up there. They don't want commercial property up there. Why should I have to live next to this commercial property, suffer by the congestion, and then have the taxes that this commercial property in my hamlet provide go up to the Springs? I mean, that's the argument.
Well, on the other side of the coin, you have a shopping center like the One Stop on Springs Fireplace Road, which is, a lot of people think it is in Springs.
I thought it was. Until
yeah, I know everybody does,
yeah.
But it's not. It's just south of Abraham's Path, which puts it in East Hampton. And I would venture to say that the vast majority of business that is done there.
Oh, it's got to be the
Yeah,
Springs. Yeah, I mean,
it's Springs.
everybody thinks of that as the entranceway to the Springs.
And it is.
And that's where you stop and you buy the food. And
That's
if you
right.
have a campaign, you put the campaign poster or whatever it is. up there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we as a community are supporting those businesses, as we are the businesses in downtown East Hampton and in Amagansett.
And probably the businesses along Springs Fireplace Road.
Absolutely.
Which is they're industrial businesses,
Yes.
but they're different. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that would be a fair way of doing it, because we are certainly overburdened by that, and we have to pay a considerable amount of money. It's $20-some-odd thousand per child to go to the East Hampton High School. And as our population rises at the Springs School, so does that cost as they move on. And as I said, we are probably the least wealthy hamlet in all of East Hampton. And it's a burden. It's a burden on a lot of people.
Well, you know, you touched on something that's been a political hot potato, which we at the GGG have discussed a lot, and that's called tax reassessment, because at least a preliminary study has been done which showed that the larger houses in the town of East Hampton, as a group, obviously there's some differences, are probably underassessed by 35%. So it means that grandma who lives in a modest house someplace is paying more taxes, so the hedge fund manager who has the $50 million house can get a tax break, which is, there's something wrong with that picture. And when we had, in fact, we had it at Ashwag Hall. A couple of years ago, there was a race for town council. We had 5 people running, and we asked the same question to all 5. And this question was, should there be a reassessment in the town of East Hampton? And we explained that in the history of the town, there's never been a reassessment, and that many people have the wrong idea. Most people think if I buy a house that's 40 years old, that day it gets reassessed. It doesn't. It goes with the 50-year-old assessment. So we asked all the candidates this, and the first 4 candidates had exactly the same answer, which I've heard 1,000 times. This is a real problem. It's probably unfair, but it's going to cost $2 or $3 million to undo it, and we just haven't got the money. Now, as a practical matter, right now, East Hampton has a surplus
have the money.
sitting there, so there's plenty of money to do that. And then there was this last guy, I don't know if you know his name, Fred Overton. And Fred Overton...
Good Springs man.
I didn't even realize he was a Springs man.
Yes.
I knew him as the town clerk, but I also he was also the town assessor. So this was the person on that group who knew more detail about the inequities of the town assessments than anybody in the town.
Yeah.
And he started out saying, this will probably cost me the election because I know nobody votes for anybody who wants to mention the word reassessment. And he said, I absolutely support it right now. We can find the money, we can do it. And then, of course, there was a hush over the audience. So this is a hot potato. It's sort of like Social Security for the federal government is reassessment. And then so many people are afraid that their assessments will go up. And the reality is taxes stay the same. It's just that the people who pay those taxes, the amounts they pay change, and a third go up, a third go down, and a third stay the same. But if this analysis is correct, that the larger houses are underassessed, the majority of the increased assessments are going to go to those larger houses. And there's got to be some way to protect grandma or grandpa who's living in a house all their life. It's a modest house, and a $100 increase would hurt them. And you just raise the exemption higher or something like that. So this is something that
that could be worked out. I think you can almost look at this not on an individual basis, but there are various situations that could come up that maybe you could put off the reassessment until that older person. Not that they're going to die right away, but if they move out or they die or something, then whomever.
I think I think what you're saying there's an opportunity here to ironically make it easier for many of the grandmas and grandpas who are living here to live here, which is an opportunity that we're not taking because we're just afraid politically of what happens if the bugaboo of reassessment comes along.
Well, there's also from the town board's point of view, and I understand this. It doesn't do anything for them. They're not going to get any more taxes. So they are going to spend, from what I understand, it would take $1 or $2 million.
No, maybe $3, maybe $4.
Or $3, whatever it is.
I think our surplus right now is in the area of $15 million.
Well, there you go. So
it wouldn't make a big dent.
No, but it's still money spent.
Absolutely.
And with nothing, you're not going to get anything in return except you're going to get some happy people.
Well, you're going to get 1/3 of the people are going to be happy, 1/3 are going to be upset, and 1/3 are going to say, that's not a big deal.
No, they'll be upset too.
They'll be upset because
they didn't go down.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
So
you get 2/3 upset. You only have one.
No, I take it back. I now understand the psyche better now that you've explained that. So the people who got a tax reduction are also going to be mad because their taxes were not reduced as much as they deserved.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's nobody. The people who got a tax reduction didn't get a big enough one.
Big,
the people who didn't get a tax reduction or an increase should have gotten a deduction. And the people who get an increase, God knows, they're going to be mad. So you don't win any votes in this. Boy, this takes a
It's going to be a hard sell.
This is going to be.
But everybody wants it.
I never realized until we just went through this analysis of why this is such a hot potato and such a hot issue, and why it's an issue that nobody wants to address, and it is crying out in inequality.
It has to be addressed.
Inequity.
It really does, and. We just need somebody a leader to say, okay, this is not going to be easy, and there are going to be a lot of people who are unhappy with the results, but it is the right thing to do for our town.
I just figured out a great idea.
Okay.
A great idea. You get one person on the town board to say that, and then they all say, but let's take a secret ballot. And miraculously, there are 3 votes for it, but nobody knows who voted for it. I don't know if you can do that with the government in the sunshine.
Not sure how that works.
But that would be the way out of this.
Yeah. There has to be, it's got to come. I think that I'm glad we're talking about it, and I think more and more people are talking about it, and that's how things get done, is that you get it on everybody's mind, and then you can't back away from it. So I'm hoping that that's the case.
Well, what are some of the other, we talked about school taxes, we talked about a tax reassessment. What are some of the other things that people, and not even people are talking about, but people should be thinking about, which will affect the Springs and we're talking about the Springs, but obviously all of East Hampton, over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? How do you deal with some of that stuff? What are the things you can be dealing with?
A lot of things are hard to deal with. One of the things that everybody is talking about is water quality, and the town has an incentive program for people to upgrade their septic systems. And there are many rebates, I think, on the state level, on the town level, you can do that. And that's great for the individual. I wish there were more of a broader policy toward water. That I haven't heard. There are these individual initiatives, but what's the plan? You know, the overall plan for the entire town. There are problems in Wainscott, you know, and they're being addressed.
I mean, what you're saying, it's funny because you're, without having been here, you're saying the same kind of thing that somebody else has said, or at least a couple of people have said on our shows here. Before we start spending money on fixing this septic system on the corner of Main Street and 14th Street, what is the whole plan? How are we, what money do we need to solve this whole thing? And let's set up the whole plan so we know where we're going, so we don't go here and waste money here. And there's a guy who's a real bright guy but can drive anybody crazy, and I would say that if he was sitting here, and that's Paul Fiorandella. And Paul was at one of the meetings of the town board where the town board was discussing spending money or grants, giving grants to those people who were on the shore of some water body, and I've forgotten which. And Paul's major complaint at that moment in time, and he has a lot of different complaints, but he pulled up a map done by the federal government of the areas of the town.
Oh, the rising water.
That would be underwater.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that.
He was asking a very basic question. Why are we spending money to upgrade this septic system now when this house will be underwater in 20 years? And I guess the answer, honestly, was we're doing that now because for the next 20 years, we can't let this house pollute our bays and estuaries.
Yes.
But that's a hard decision to make because we're not saving that. And I'm not saying it was the wrong decision,
right?
But we're not spending the money perhaps as wisely as we could, which we're going to have to do over the next 20 years.
Well, also, you know, this is his view that in 20 years that this property will be underwater, but. You know,
well, it's the view of the federal government.
Well, right,
too,
or of any, but it is a view, you know. And Mother Nature has a funny way of changing her mind.
Yeah, she's very fickle, isn't she? I mean, it was supposed to be hot today, it was cold, and yesterday it was supposed to be cold and it was hot.
So the area that everybody thinks is going to be underwater in 20 or 30 years, that's a long time. Things could happen, storms could come, things could be rearranged, and it wouldn't be that area. It would be an area 2 miles down the shoreline that nobody thought was going to be underwater. So I feel that you have to look at things as they are today and deal with them. And of course you have to think into the future, but you can't have septic systems polluting, you know. Accabonac Harbor is our big harbor in Springs.
Oh, I kayaked there recently.
But we've had terrible pollution there. You know, it's being addressed. The school was a big polluter, but they're addressing that problem. But you can't just say, well, this is not going to be an issue in 20 years. Because people are, you're out there kayaking.
I'm out there kayaking.
And you're going to be there next year.
And I had all my grandchildren. My 2-year-old granddaughter learned to kayak.
Wow.
I never knew she understood how to do the paddling bit, but she insisted on getting a paddle.
I think 2-year-olds know how to do everything
just
intuitively.
I realized I had trouble with the paddles, but she had no problem with it whatsoever. Okay, so we have tax assessment. We have some ideas on using commercial rents, commercial taxes to benefit all the schools. What are some of the other things that you guys have been noodling about up in the Springs behind these paintings and statues that none of us see?
Well, everybody is, because we have a very diverse community living in Springs. We have a large Hispanic community, and we have a growing second homeowner group and a dwindling group of people who've lived here all their lives, who some of them move or they're getting older and dying, but that group still exists, and we all have to coexist. Because everything it's one of the densest, it is the densest hamlet, and there are some issues of overcrowding, and people are upset with that. It's a safety issue, if nothing else. So people are very concerned about code enforcement. And there are a lot of people who have small businesses or who work for businesses, so they bring their trucks, home. And it's interesting.
And then if you overcrowd, instead of one pickup truck, you've got 6.
Yeah. But here, hearkening back to what I was first talking about looking at the town code, years ago, the Springs CAC tried to address the issue of trucks on residential property.
I remember some of the discussions.
It went on forever, and everybody had an opinion. But the problem was in the way the law was written, and it said that there were 2 light trucks that were permitted on residential property. But what does that mean? A light truck to one person is 10,000 pounds. A light truck to somebody who has...
a concrete company is a small cement mixer.
It's a small cement mixer, right?
Right.
They're
sure.
much bigger ones. So this is a light one. So you can make a case, every way. That's a serious problem. We got nowhere with that.
So what you're really saying is some of the code provisions should be looked at and made relevant to today's environment.
Absolutely.
And really tried to get away from the fact that, well, that's always been that way. It should be there in the future, and why bother? But I'm looking up at my time clock, and I realize we have 4 seconds to thank you. And thank you very much, Lauren, for everything you do for the community,
Well, thank you.
Which is much more than the people realize. Thank you very much, seriously.
My pleasure to be here.